And we're live. Welcome back, guys. This is the Solvable Mysteries podcast. After a 1 week's hiatus, we are back. I'm back in my city. I'm back recording, and I'm very excited to be joined by Glenn Heiko this week. And we have a very exciting case. This one is um, I don't know. Usually, I don't get that fascinated by cases as I have been, by this one. So, dude, how are you doing? Are you excited to be back again? And what do you think about this case?
Yeah, definitely. You hear that sound? I hear the sound of thousands of people cheering that you are back after listening to me fumble around for a couple hours this week. I definitely. It's funny because I don't think people don't understand that when you and I, like, for every hour that you and I do talking like this, that you are doing probably like 4 to 10 hours of work on the back end
Not that much.
to produce it. I mean, probably just me being incompetent on the on the editing when I was trying to do it for myself. But it was like, whoa, like this is a ton of work, and yeah, I'm definitely super happy for you to be back,
Yeah.
and for us to have our normal show. So yeah, definitely this case. I mean, the more I learn about it, the more I'm like, how did this never come up on my radar?
This is crazy, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about the Missy Bevers case. Now, I've heard her last name, pronounced in two different ways. I think one Australian YouTuber pronounced her last name Bevers, but mostly Americans, I think, stick to Beavers. So I don't know, dude. What do you think is the correct pronunciation of Missy's last name?
I mean, it probably is Bevers, but Beavers is way more fun to say, and I feel like that's how everyone else says it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think we could stick to Beavers. I mean, no disrespect to Missy, or we could just stick to Missy. This is a fascinating case. It's of a fitness instructor who lived in a small town in Texas, and she died under, I don't know, wouldn't you agree, dude? Probably the most mysterious circumstances that we've looked into like this year, because nothing makes any sense here, right?
Yeah, I mean, for something that's not a disappearance and that's like a murder, like they're pretty sure it's a murder. They they're pretty sure they kind of know what the person looks like in some ways, right? There's a description of the person, but I mean, but other than that, it's like a super wide open question as far as what happened.
Exactly,
Yeah,
dude.
it's super odd.
I think before we jump into the day when it actually happened, I think we could probably talk a little bit about Missy herself. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, you know, I don't know if you had the same situation during your research, but I found that the information is for some reason pretty scarce about this case. Like there is information, but it's like I would say there's a lot of misinformation, right? So did you run into this issue where you probably like where you may have had like a hard time collecting data on this woman?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is one of those cases where there's a lot of both formal and informal articles. Like it's almost like there's a lot of word of mouth, there's a lot of Reddit, but there's no like Wikipedia article, right? There's not a lot of even detail about maybe here, all these other cases. We kind of have some kind of detail about the person's early life or some other things about her, but like there's a ton of detail about kind of right around, let's say a year long period in her life.
Yeah, I think we could start off with just an introduction to her. So, yeah, as you've said, there is no Wikipedia, but I found some other, like, sort of, I guess, Walmart Wikipedia version or something like that. Uh, and it pretty much has, I think, the basic information on Terry, Lean Missy Bevers. So, the first thing of note that Missy is not her. Real name. Her real name is Terry, but I think she just took that name for some reason in her life. I didn't really check that detail. So as I've said, she was, an American fitness instructor, and she was murdered. Obviously, that's why we're talking about her. You know, she was born, as I'm reading here, in 1970, in August 9, to James Clinton Strickland and Norma Strickland. She was the second child of three, so she had two brothers. One was Clifford, and the other one was Clint. Um, Missy attended Jacksboro High School, and she graduated in '88. She then applied into different colleges until she started to attend the Tarleton State University, where she obtained a degree in sciences in '95. However, in '98, she married Brandon Bevers, or Beavers. Now, Brandon will play a part in this case. I think we will want to talk a little bit about him because some people do speculate that maybe he was involved in the murder of Missy, but I don't think we need to speculate on any of these characters before we actually talk about how it went down. Because for everyone who's listening to the podcast and have not yet, been familiar with this case, you're in for a wild ride. We have CCTV footages, we have just the most bizarre, like, I don't know, 5 hours of events that probably hit the city of Midlothian in the last few decades for sure. Missy also had kids. She had one daughter named Hannah, another was Ali, and the third daughter was Sarah. So Missy actually, after getting married with Brandon, the man that we will be referring to later on in the show, from my research, she began like teaching because her passion was always helping people. At least that's what's being portrayed here. She seemed like a very nice and helpful person. So she started teaching, I don't know, like school stuff probably. But when she was having all of those daughters in early 2000s, she decided that it's best for her to stay home with the daughters and raise them. But as soon as they got a little bit older and they did not need as much care, Terry Missy Bevers, she decided that she wants to go back out there, and she actually transformed her life. Like, she became very fit. Like, from her pictures, we can see that she's a very athletic woman. And she basically started teaching fitness classes on a program called Camp Gladiator. I've never heard about that. I think that's a Texas thing. And on the month of April in 2016, something very wacky and unexplainable happened. And before we jump into that section, the April, or just in general, I guess 2016 up until April, I just want to get your take on her general life. Maybe I've missed some points. Maybe you have some more details on her.
No, I mean, I think you've done a good, probably a better summary than I was going to do, certainly, in terms of getting the extra detail. I mean, it is interesting, but not uncommon to hear this sort of story about somebody who, I mean, frankly, would, by the time kind of the horrible stuff happens to her, she's almost exactly my age. And coincidentally, she was married the same year I was married. So it was every time I looked at these little details, I'm like, huh, there's some similarities. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as we get further into the case to try to look at, and once I want to put a little preface on this that um, because some of the details about people's personal lives are going to get into an area where maybe it's relationship stuff and relationships that are having some problems, and um, I want to stress that we're not blaming the victim, right? Like people's personal lives are complicated. I think when we start discussing maybe motives for why people do things, or how someone else could come and become involved in this person's life, it's not putting blame or saying the person deserved it, or certainly not victim blaming. What it is doing is pointing out that all of a sudden, something might go from like having no motive to this is how other people got involved, let's say, in the situation. So that's kind of my little preface there. So one of the things I thought of right away is it is interesting because sometimes, especially when you're my age, so you're like in your 40s, 30s, 40s, and you suddenly have like a big push in your own personal life to make yourself look a lot better. Sometimes that's a sign that like maybe, well, a couple things are going on. You could be just like on the surface of it, just trying to look better and get healthy because you're about halfway through your life. But sometimes it's also almost like positioning yourself for second chances in life at other things, and other relationships. And certainly that's, a long time in a current relationship. I've seen this pattern before. I noticed that was actually one of the warning signs in the Chris Watts case, was that he had been kind of massively overweight for a big chunk of his life. And then all of a sudden he dropped a lot of weight and was getting super muscular. And that's when the other stuff happened in his life. So, I couldn't help but notice that part of it. And once again, it's a totally different situation because Chris Watts was accused of something, and we're certainly not accusing Missy Bevers of anything. Um, why would we? But yeah, it is interesting to hear that whole fitness thing. Also, you mentioned the kind of the Camp Gladiator thing. So I don't know if this is you have this in Lithuania, but
No.
boot.
Oh, like camp. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah, the boot camp fitness stuff. Do you have that? Is that like a thing?
I'm not sure. We have like probably something similar, but maybe there isn't a big chain that has yet sort of monopolized the whole scene. Maybe that's where I come in eventually. You know what I mean? That's a good idea.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's certainly something. It is interesting. She was kind of on the front end of that. So, there's CrossFit and things like that that have to do with body weight exercises, and that I think she's kind of coming in right at the front of a trend where people were like, hey, for all the weightlifting and aerobics classes and stuff like that, like where do people go to get fit? They go to boot camp for the military, and people had like some great ideas. Are like, hey, well, why can't we just do those same exercises as normal civilians and get in the same kind of shape? So, I actually saw this. I know somebody from high school, in elementary school, who got like he went from like being someone who didn't do anything like that and who was out of shape, and he was in the military, to like working at one of these places and being just totally turning his life around. So that seems to be what was going on here.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a good point. I have not thought about it, but it definitely makes sense. Maybe when your personal life is not super, I don't know, pleasing, and you want to maybe get into other relationships with other people, you want to look your best self. But also Missy was, I think, really into helping other people throughout like fitness, and she really cared about her students from all I've gathered. And I think you've managed to uncover a really good timeline file for us to talk about this week. I think we should definitely leave a link to that in the description, if you know what I mean, dude. Because, dude, I don't know how you found it, but it's really good. And I think I can open it up right now because I have downloaded, and it's pretty much seriously like the best line of events I think that we could like just go through and analyze and see what actually happened. So I think we could like sort of begin the timeline on January 2016. MB, so MB stands for Missy Bevers. She begins speaking with CW on LinkedIn. Conversation turns flirtatious and familiar and continues up until Missy Bever's death. Now, I have no idea who CW is, but I heard about this LinkedIn connection. There was apparently someone messaging her on LinkedIn, and there were some sort of a flirtatious type of a conversation that Missy had with CW. So, without stopping here for too long, I think we will mention this maybe later on the show. But have you got any idea who CW is?
So, I mean, in terms of who that person is, I think
Yeah.
the CW part is keeping them anonymous. But the important part was that, after the thing happens that we're going to talk about, the police, once again, it's people kind of assume that the police are experts on everything, and frankly, they're not. I mean, a lot of times, you and I were just talking before the call about a neighborhood watch meeting where like the police officer in my neighborhood watch didn't really know how to use the computer right for this Zoom meeting. And case in point, for all of the forensic investigation that they were doing into like cell phones and smartphones and internet connections, but then somebody came to the police and they were like, hey, just so you think you have everything covered with this cell phone stuff, but I was having these whole set of conversations with her on LinkedIn. Am I on your radar at all? And that's when they were like, oh my gosh, there's this whole other avenue, because they don't even think
Oh,
about social media. You know what I mean? Yeah, where they're like, hey, that's a whole other company whose records you need to subpoena. And then, they're worried like, hey, who knows how much a company like LinkedIn or any other social media place, who knows how long they actually keep
yes.
messages on file, right? So yeah, that was, I think, where it came in on under their radar, and that was the important part of that particular thing, was that not necessarily that this person did anything, of course. I mean, because I think they actually volunteered themselves, but just
Okay.
the fact that like, yeah, like once again, there's sort of these blind spots in the investigation
Mm,
that if it wasn't somebody who was kind of frankly, somebody who exposed themselves to being embarrassed, right?
yeah,
In
yeah.
their own personal life, but out of the kindness of their heart for the investigation, they got involved and exposed themselves.
I found it very curious how you would flirt on LinkedIn, because out of all the apps, I personally think LinkedIn is probably the least likely place where I would probably try to get a date, but it is what it is. Now we can jump to April 14th, because this is gonna be, things are gonna get really crazy, especially when we jump to the surveillance footages that we're gonna analyze. Is gonna be really interesting. I can't wait for that. But before that, Missy Bevers on April 14th, she posts a Facebook post from Austin, Texas, CG. That's Camp Gladiator event. So let's check that out. So Missy just says, gaining knowledge for total transformation, Austin. Missy, I want to do that. Someone replied. She has like 12 likes. Everything's going swell. The following day, BB. Now, BB is Brandon Beavers, the husband of Missy, and he has a minor surgery procedure at BUMC. They actually have a source for this, but it's unavailable actually right now. On the same day, Missy Beaver posts another Facebook post, photos, I mean, from Austin, Texas, another CG event. Do we have those? No, but we have a map. Okay, so we can see that she's posting a lot about her location. So this will come into play. Trust me, guys, when you find out how she died, the fact that she was putting out her location a lot might come back to haunt her a little bit. I'm not, obviously blaming her, but just it is what it is. And we have a lot of people who respond, and then Missy Beavers also responds, and like in a really uplifting manner, I would say. We have at some point Missy Beaver receives a creepy LinkedIn message. Now, do we have the Yep, we do have, but it's CBS News. I don't want to stay here for too long because CBS, they might not like us showing their stuff. But I want to stop here for a second, ask your opinion about this second LinkedIn message that we see happening just, days before Missy dies. Now, this LinkedIn message, from all I've gathered, was Missy showed it to a friend, and the friend said that it was super creepy, but apparently there is no information online regarding the contents of this LinkedIn message. Do you have anything else to add to this second LinkedIn message?
No, I mean, only just that a lot of women I know get a lot of creepy messages from guys. It's really sad, but I mean,
On LinkedIn, though?
just everywhere. Yeah, I mean, guys, look, I mean, this isn't me like trying to get all like like politically correct or try to get on like I don't know, play like that card. But I guess the older I get and the more I hear from like my wife and our my like my kids friends mothers and other people, we're just, man, women just have to fend off a lot of really aggressive, sometimes like just totally unsolicited, uninvited.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Just, I mean, I never was really on my radar when I was like in my 20s, or even 30s. But now that I'm older and people show me stuff, where just out of the blue, people just come at them with like, "Hey," blah, blah, and it's like, "Hey, like this is a married lady, or or whatever it is. You don't have to be married to not want someone to come at you like that." But I guess part of me doesn't necessarily think, I mean, other than, what happened to Missy, part of me is like, well, I think it happens to women a lot, and it's super unfortunate.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Uh, Following day, April 16th, Missy Bevers posts photos from Austin, Texas, another Camp Gladiator. When do you have these pictures? Yep, we do. So this is Missy. This is Missy with, I guess, a fellow student at her fitness class. We have Missy with some more students. I think these are like, yeah, still probably, yeah, still from the same day. Yep. Just, yeah. Oh, look. So, okay. So, first of all, I didn't realize that CG, Camp Gladiator, was like a really big time thing, but they have their own like little, how should I put it, like vans or whatever, and like big Chevy trucks. Okay, so this was a serious operation, and now we jump to April 17th. Yeah, this is when things will start getting really suspicious. So April 17th, we have 5:20 a.m. in the morning. Brandon Beavers, the father, the husband of Missy Bevers, posts a Facebook photo of a weather radar, refers to noon flight, because this is where I'll want to jump a little bit to the Google Earth for just a few seconds. Okay, so we can't open this one, but I do know that Brandon Beavers, because, okay, so basically this is Midlothian, right? Just a city in Texas, but we have Brandon Beavers. One day before Missy is murdered, I believe, he flies with his company on a fishing trip, I'm sorry, to Biloxi, which is in Mississippi. I guess it's a pretty popular fishing destination. Um, yeah, some people find it very suspicious how Missy dies literally the following day when Brandon leaves for a fishing trip. Some people found it pretty suspicious how could this be a potential alibi building procedure by Brandon? Now, I want to just get this out of the way. I don't think that was the case. I don't think Brandon was involved in any way. But yeah, do you have any more information on this fishing trip?
I think it was even like a work related fishing trip or something. It was something that had been planned for a while. And then when I look at him in the interviews later, he seems like the kind of guy who's always doing outdoorsy, like fishing and hunting and that kind of stuff. Like that's his lifestyle. Like that's what he does. And a lot of people in this part of the United States, I would say that whole kind of southern rural or semi-rural area, like that's their lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
like so some people go to clubs or go to museums or whatever. Like I'm sure this dude kind of lives for that kind of stuff. So I don't know. From my point of view, yeah. I mean, I can understand someone to look at that and be like, oh, of course, when he's on the trip, that's when that happens. But I just think it's probably, if it was going to happen, there was probably like a coins toss chance, 50-50. You know what I mean? That it was going to happen when he was on one of these trips, because he's probably always on a trip. Like maybe that's even part of the issues in the relationship, right?
Yeah, yeah. We'll talk about the issues shortly. Let's just go through April 17th. The other key points that we have on this wonderful timeline: 12 p.m. Just noon. Brandon Beaver's flight to MS, Mississippi takes off, I guess, and on 7:30 p.m. in the evening, Brandon allegedly arrives in Biloxi. I found it curious why this timeline says allegedly. Maybe it's still alleged. Who knows? I'm pretty sure it happened. Missy Bevers, just 5 minutes before 8 p.m. in the evening, posts on Facebook time and place of, this is very important, CG class scheduled for next morning, because she apparently checked the weather report and it was about to rain the following morning in Midlothian. So she wrote, if it's, I don't think she wrote it, but she posted like a picture of, if it's raining, we're still training. No excuses. You are gladiators. So let's see if we, now we don't have it. Okay, whatever. I might whip it up in post production. So the concept is that they were supposed to train outside the following morning on April 18th, as they usually do, but since it's going to be raining heavily, they decide, or Missy decides to sort of still do the workouts, but do them in the church, in the Creekside Church. And this is the place where Missy eventually is murdered. Now, we'll get to that pretty shortly, but she apparently scheduled that for the following morning. I just want to quickly go through the timeline and then we can react to it. An hour later, a little bit over an hour later, on 9:15 p.m. in the evening, Brandon posts another photo of exterior of half shelf oyster house, with Biloxi, Mississippi geotag, and says, quote, first stop after 5 hours, plane trip. So I guess this is, one of the we can't see it unfortunately, but I guess this is one of the proofs that we have that Brandon definitely went to Biloxi. Then we have shortly after that, 9:23 p.m. in the evening, Missy Bevers posts on Facebook that she's going to bed because she has to wake up early at 3:30 a.m. in the following morning, because let's remember, the classes are supposed to start at 5 a.m. in the morning of the 18th of April. So she needs to wake up before 5 a.m. because she still needs to drive there, set it up, do everything. So she needs to wake up at 3:30 a.m. And I found it pretty curious that she posted it. I think we could find the post somewhere. Then the last piece of the timeline on April 17th, the day before she's murdered, Missy Bevers and Brandon Bevers allegedly speak on the phone before bed, and someone says, "I love you." Okay, we don't want to watch that. I think that's just the interview from Brandon Bevers. I've seen that interview. He seems. Some people found his mannerisms pretty suspicious. I think the relationship troubles that they were having may explain that. We will discuss them shortly. So yeah, before we jump to April 18th, the day when Missy actually dies, that fateful April 18th, where just the craziest things will about to happen soon. Uh, Before that, dude, do you have anything to add for April 17th?
No, I have nothing additional.
Great, dude. I think let's move immediately to April 18th. So, MPD, Midlothian Police Department's official timeline is that and this is where things are gonna get crazy. Okay, I think we should start off with, let's jump to Google Earth Maps, SWFA Outdoors. Now, this is I guess a store for like that sells like, I don't know, maybe like some hunting equipment, camping equipment, outdoorsy types of things. And at 2 a.m., I immediately want to jump to the surveillance. At 2 a.m., we have this dude. We have a Nissan vehicle, I think a Nissan sedan type of a vehicle, doing some weird stuff in a business that's pretty much across the street from the church that Missy dies, let's say, 3 hours after this. So, first of all, dude, what do you see happening here? I haven't asked your opinion about this, and I have no idea how to explain what we're looking at. But what do you see here, dude?
I mean, it's strange behavior in this parking lot at like a really weird time of night. Um, the person seems to be sort of aimlessly going through the parking lot, and they don't necessarily seem to be trying to hide themselves, even though incidentally, by, by them staying in the light, the reflection actually did end up messing up the police's ability later to pull any kind of data, like who was inside the car. But I don't think the person knew that when they were doing it. And they do like weird flashing their lights at strange times. Some people thought it was almost like a signal, and it just it didn't really look like directed behavior. But then the person seems to be stopping at strategic times, and then as the video goes on, and they do like this whole orbit. And once again, I guess for anybody that listens to this later in the podcast, this is, like I said, this is like 3 in the morning or so.
2 a.m.
It
Yeah.
2 a.m. It's a really I always think of that. I'll tell you, even like around here in crowded Los Angeles, before the lockdown, at 2, 3 in the morning, it is empty outside. Even here, where like I could actually crawl across the street or something. You know what I mean? There's so it's a really weird time to be out. It's pouring rain. I mean, the street's slick, and yeah, just over this course of what, several minutes, this person's just doing this weird orbit around really a completely empty parking lot because the place is closed. There's a couple cars parked there that maybe, I don't know why they were there. Maybe they belonged to the owner or something. I don't think anybody was inside the building. I think the building was closed. The building's dark, so it doesn't look like anybody's like doing inventory
Yeah.
or something like that. But then here at the end, or near the end, like the person goes and does like, they make like a weird, they actually stop under the light. And one of the theories was that maybe the person was doing something in the car, like changing their clothes, or something where I guess you wanted. Here it is, right here, the video. So they go and they park under the light. So that's the other weird thing to me. And it's so strange that they weren't worried about like cops or security or anybody coming up on them. So it's almost like they kind of knew either that, or they didn't care. So that's another thing to think about. We often try to ascribe rational behavior to people, but there's a certain kind of person who isn't really that organized and doesn't really necessarily have the same normal thought processes or fear responses that the rest of us have. There's some people that like don't get caught just because they're lucky, right? But they do kind
Yeah.
of everything wrong.
But
But yeah.
like my line of thinking is if you're gonna dress into an outfit and then you're gonna go and commit a murder, wouldn't you dress probably not in a parking lot where you pretty damn well know that there are security cameras and then in the light also? So I don't know, man. It's without giving out too much information because I think some members of the audience may have not be even familiar with this case at this point, so they may not know how this could relate to Missy's death because this is not the only thing that's suspicious that it happened. Uh, next to the place where Missy was murdered, there were certain details in her murder that sort of could explain like this being connected to her. Without stopping here for too long, dude, any ideas, any like normal explanations, non-criminal explanations of doing such drive around, outdoors clothing store in 2 a.m. in the morning. Any ideas what this
Yeah,
could be?
yeah. The one thing I will say, and I'll say it because it's a problem I have right next to me is I live on a street where my driveway and the neighbor across from me's driveway, there's just kind of this stretch of street where there's not really any windows. There's just like walls and fences. And I've had a problem for the longest time, and apparently a lot of other neighbors in in my area do, with people doing exactly this, what we were seeing in the video, driving around, parking next to their house, sitting on the phone, playing around on their phone. Sorry, yeah, sitting on the phone, playing on their phone, eating, sleeping, doing other things, doing drugs, leaving trash. So,
Yeah,
I mean, there is a certain person where it's like that's what they like to do. They like to be out and about. They can't really find something better to do with themselves. I'm always mystified. I'm always like, why are these people not in their houses? How pathetic is their life that like they need to camp outside of my front door to have a good time with, it's not even them by themselves. It's like them with other people. But so like that's you asked, so I'm telling you that's my
yeah,
innocent explanation is it just could have been randomly some other person and the cops haven't discounted that possibility.
exactly. And I think now it's the perfect time to jump to the timeline since the Nissan leaves the premise. Okay, I think we have some more angles on this. We might end up. Oh yeah, just some more angles of the car actually leaving. So that was pretty weird, and the car left. So this was the area. This was the parking lot that we've seen. I think it stopped right at this, or maybe this parking area. I think it spun around once. This is the area where I think the owner's cars may have been parked. But then it drives, if I'm not mistaken, it drives into this direction. Well, obviously because it's only one way street, as I've seen. So it drives to the right direction. But to the left direction, we have the Creekside Church, and just madness will ensue in the Creekside Church. Let's jump to the timeline and let's talk about it. Okay, so April 18th, the first event was that, Nissan sedan doing that weird stuff. I don't know what to make of it, but, let's move 1 hour and 50 minutes into the timeline at 3:50 a.m. in the morning. So suspect 1 was seen on the church surveillance cameras after breaking into church. We'll look at it really quickly at the surveillance because we do have that. That's why this case is so crazy. Now, within the 30-minute period, so for 30 minutes after breaking into that Creekside church, the same church that Missy is supposed to arrive also shortly to set up the fitness class, there's another man or woman, we don't know at this point who it was, and it will make sense very quickly why we don't know, uh, is had just broken inside of that church and is captured for 30 minutes on the church's internal surveillance cameras, because I believe the external ones were not working, but only the internal ones, the ones inside of the church, were actually working. And the suspect that had broken in is the same suspect that eventually will murder Missy, but he is seen on the camera just rummaging from room to room with a hammer or some sort of a tool in his hand, spends several minutes in the kitchen. So I think we could jump straight into the video. By the way, before we jump into the surveillance, I just want to quickly mention that there is this podcast, podcast called Gumshoe Stories, and Gumshoe Stories is an awesome podcast. I would say I did listen to it a little bit. I didn't listen the entirety of it. I just didn't have the time, but it's a really great podcast, and they actually fixed the sequence of this break-in. So let's jump in because we have the officially released sequence, but I guess the person who is responsible for this particular video that we are watching from a Gumshoe Stories podcast, they have fixed the surveillance video. So it's only 2 minutes, so I'm just gonna loop it, and I think we can discuss it. So this is what it is. Oh, by the way, I think we can stop right here, dude. You probably can see the footage, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so basically we see some sort of a figure. Now, this figure was wearing apparently like a SWAT outfit, but not like a professional SWAT outfit, like a make-believe SWAT outfit. I think they broke into one window from, from not from this room, but like there are two adjacent rooms that connect to each other. You don't have to go to the main hallway to get from one room to the other because they're interconnected within the walls. And so basically the guy that or woman, we don't know, actually did enter through the window because there was a broken window. So we all believe that he probably entered, or she entered through the window, but now he leaves that room and now he's into the hallway. So let's just I don't know, dude, your reactions to the guy. I mean, he seems like he's just walking around, just broke into a church at almost 4 a.m. in the morning, and he's just chilling out.
Yeah, I mean, one thing it was interesting in the interviews later with Brandon, he pointed out that his opinion of the outfit, I mean, it does there's the person's wearing like this kind of police vest, and someone said it was like a shoddy police vest, like it wasn't a good one. That had it says police in the front and back, but Brandon was pointing out that in his opinion, and I don't know if he has law enforcement experience or friends or, sometimes a lot of people know stuff about tactical gear. He didn't think it was real tactical gear. He thought it was like a mixture of like motorcycle gear, like maybe it was motorcycle boots, and maybe he couldn't even tell what kind of helmet. Like maybe it was a motorcycle helmet. Like in his opinion, I mean, obviously, it's someone who's trying to look maybe tactical or like something. But the other thing that everybody notices is because when you look at it, obviously the person's trying to disguise themselves and really has covered themselves to the point that you really can't tell anything about them. I mean, all you can really tell is that they're human. I mean, assuming, right? They
Yeah.
have two legs, two arms that seem to work. They seem to have a, like a head that works as they're walking around. But so the things that strike me are the walk. So the person has this very like open-toed duck walk that they have, and people. I mean, one of the people I watched, Stephanie Harlow, who I'll mention again later, but I really liked her presentation on YouTube. She has a two-parter that's really awesome. She said for her, when people said, well, when the cops said they weren't really sure if it was a man or a woman, well, she was like, gosh, when she was pregnant, she remembered walking like that. When she was kind of deep into her pregnancy, she had the same kind of duck walk,
Wow.
this kind of weird, yeah, because the person, I mean, it's kind of an amazing disguise in a way
Yeah,
because you can't really tell what's going on. And then, yeah, here in the video we're seeing here, the other thing was, it's so weird because you could go into it, and the more I watch it, the less certain I am about the gender of the person. Not just the stereotype, but because they estimate the person's height is between like 5'2" and 5'7", which isn't super tall. So that could be easily somebody from both genders, as opposed to like if they were like 6'2" or something, my height.
yeah.
That kind of cuts down demographically a lot of the gender suspects. But the other thing is the way the person's using the tools, they don't really seem like they're serious about breaking in, right? They don't even really need to. And frankly, after the fact, it turns out, nothing was really missing. So it almost looks like they're putting on a show, right? Of like, it doesn't really look like they know what they're doing. Like they're pulling on this doorknob and like, okay, I'm not a thief, but I know how to use a freaking crowbar and I know how to use a hammer. And I know like, it doesn't really look like they really know what they're doing with this thing, or they're just kind of putting on this little like pretend demonstration for the camera that they know is there, right? They know the cameras, like you said, are in this place. They're not trying to break cameras or anything, right? They're sort of,
Yeah.
yeah.
So the height was, I don't know if you mentioned it, the estimated height was between 5'2" and 5'7". So, 5'2", I mean, that's definitely, female range, if you know what I mean. Like,
Oh yeah.
so, yeah, and this is another interesting part. By the way, I think we should stop it for a few seconds, right? I think this door, if I'm not mistaken, this door could be the same door that Missy entered through. If I'm not mistaken, you have any idea on that? I believe so.
Stephanie Harlow, she had an awesome map
Yeah.
on her show. You saw that, right? Where she was like demonstrating. I mean, she did, once again, I just, like I said, I know sometimes I crap on other people's
Right.
channels. Not this time. Like this person's show, I think anybody that listens to us should also go and check out all like 2 hours of her show on it, which is, it's got a lot of detailed, and
Facts. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of facts where, like, I think she did us a big favor by kind of doing a good job of filtering and having the latest and greatest. So it kind of allowed us to be able to go and kind of concentrate on the parts that we want to concentrate on. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I think it looked like the person kind of, yeah, I think to your point, by the time that one piece of footage right here, I think that is right at the entrance where Missy eventually
Yeah,
gets in. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. I think so. I think that's what had happened. Now, just quickly, let's go through the timeline to get to the point where the tragedy does eventually occur. So, this is all happening in between the time space of 3:50 a.m. and 4:20 a.m. in the morning. Now, at 4:16 a.m. in the morning, Missy Bever's truck pulls into church parking lot. Now, she enters the church at around 4:20 a.m., so just 40 minutes before that scheduled CG fitness class. Now, AT, oh yeah, Tucker, whatever, Iman, that's, I think we will mention briefly later on the show. He posts on Facebook about the CG class. I think the first CG camper arrives at the church at 4:35 a.m. in the morning and waits in his car in the parking lot. Now, CG calls scheduled to start calls. Maybe that's the practice, whatever. So the CG class was scheduled to start at 5 a.m. And, I think there isn't like, okay, so people probably started entering the church at around 5 a.m. That's, I think I've heard like some, because I'm looking at this timeline, I think I've heard something that it happened like 5:04 a.m. that the first person entered or something like that, but I could be mistaken here. But they do end up calling 911, and apparently, the officers arrive and they find Missy Bevers dead. She was pronounced dead on the scene. And I immediately wanna, let's jump back to this surveillance footage. I immediately wanna just clear out a few misunderstandings that I've had. So the first thing I think that you could correct here is, maybe you know this information, this is definitely what we're seeing, not the full CCTV footage. I believe there is more CCTV footage than this. I believe there is CCTV footage of Missy entering the church, if I'm not mistaken. But I've also read from multiple air sources that there isn't actual footage of the murder. There is only additional footage of this person, in the SWAT gear, and I think there is footage of Missy entering the Creekside Church. Maybe you have some more detail on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's weird that it almost seems like the cops are withholding certain pieces of evidence. I don't have a lot of additional info other than, like you said, the external cameras either mysteriously or not mysteriously, or weren't working. So that's sort of a whole set of data that's missing. I mean, one thing that was brought up is there was a theory, and I don't know if it's been confirmed, that this person may have broken windows earlier in the evening to test if there was any kind of burglar alarm system. Like, because obviously coming into that place and then having the cops or the security company show up 10 minutes later
Yeah.
would have been a totally different situation. But yeah, I mean, other than that, that's one of those things where the timeline, and that ties in obviously to the video we saw earlier, where
Yeah.
some people thought, maybe if this was a planned event for what happened, that the person had kind of tested the waters a little bit, then gone off to kind of kill time, and then had come back just to see if anything had happened.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I want to mention a little bit on what kind of injuries were sustained. Now, to my understanding, the autopsy has not been released since it's an open investigation. However, Missy Bever's bleeding body had numerous puncture wounds, both in the head as well as the chest. So puncture wounds.
Y-
What does that say to you, dude?
Yeah.
Hammer would a hammer do the puncture wound?
So that was another thing that I'll have to kind of defer to Stephanie Harlow's show on this, but because yeah, when I look at this, obviously you see this person with it looks like a hammer and a pry bar, like one or more things, and you just assume, well, he or she beat Missy to death with it, especially by the description. They're like puncture wounds, head, chest. They never say anything like gunshot wounds, but then Stephanie was saying on her show that another person who had investigated the case had actually been able to get access to the FBI files on the case, and it says right there in the file that she even puts it up on the screen that she was killed not only by a firearm, like it explicitly says that that's what killed her, but it says that the actual firearm was left on the scene. So
Mm.
it sounds like some kind of handgun was left on the scene, but to your point, they've kept that detail away. Maybe, like we've talked about in other cases, maybe to keep the fakers away or to use that maybe during interrogations as one of those pieces of evidence that they could kind of test with somebody to see whether they're guilty or not.
Exactly. Okay, so that being said, I think it's time to jump because I definitely want to keep talking about like what we're seeing here, because this is crazy. I do have some more points that I want to add here, and I'm sure the audience still wants us to like talk about what we're seeing here because this is insane. But dude, do you want to present? I'm not sure if I'm super well aware of the whole situation. I'm hoping that you are maybe a little bit better prepared to talk about that. Do you want to present the issues that relationship and financial issues that Brandon Beavers as well as Missy Beavers were having? Well, before I just want to don't want to just like throw you under the bus for all the details. I wanna sort of add what I know. I know that um, at some point the police sort of got a permission from, I guess, I know, from someone who gives out permission to check the phones, and they found messages, and those messages indicated that there was an affair going on. I don't know to what extent the affair was actually happening. Was it between Missy and someone else? So I don't have any information regarding Brandon. I don't think Brandon had any affairs going on. I think Missy herself had an affair happening with some other dude. I think I have his name, just for just to keep this as professional as possible. The man was, I believe, Kevin Cozine, and Kevin Cozine had a wife who was Michelle Cozine. So, some people think that this person, since we don't know if it's a woman or a man, with the hammer and the SWAT gear, maybe this was Kevin's wife and she's, trying to kill Missy in retribution. Kevin Cozine is like an MMA fighter. He's also into fitness, and I think the same Stephanie Harlow, on her fantastic show, stated that Kevin Cozine definitely did have an affair with Missy. Like that was happening. There was some other people that Missy was chatting with. We have AJ Tucker and his wife. I don't think this man was having an affair, but I might be also mistaken here. Yeah, they've also found other things on her phone, messages like messages from Brandon Beavers that sort of indicated some sort of a financial troubles in their life. Yeah, and some other people as well, like some extended family members. But I think the only person who she really was super 100% connected to have an affair with was Kevin Cosine, if I'm not mistaken. And it was happening for like almost like a year ish before she passed away. So that's all I have, dude. Hopefully, you have something more to add.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because on one hand, and then once again, I got to reference Harlow's show. It's almost like we're a commercial for her, but she pointed out she shows this warrant that the police get to get kind of all these different records and messages from different people's phones, and all the people you mentioned, they're on this warrant. And yeah, they're kind of like some of them are basically kind of like coworkers, where they're part of her Camp Gladiator program. And so like already it's not unusual, I guess, for coworkers to maybe become involved in some way later, because it's just you're going to get involved with people, right? And maybe especially if you have a shared interest and you're both making your bodies look really good. But then there's also like people, as you mentioned, who didn't work for it, but were also in the actual program. So they're also they're working out, they're part of it. Now, the one thing I'll say for all that, the police said that they cleared everybody on that whole list. So all the people whose names we listed, including the wives, all of them, according to what I saw on that show, were cleared. So they're not considered suspects. But my kind of bigger point would be that it seems like these were not the only potential dalliances. So on one hand, it sounds like she got caught, her husband was aware of something that had happened, and that they may have been in kind of a recovery phase, or at least he may have thought they were in a recovery phase of their relationship, where she had been sending these messages to him every day. I love you, kind of almost like, once again, Stephanie's interpretation, I think, as a wife and a mother and a woman, was that this was Missy's attempts to sort of try to rebuild the relationship and strengthen it again. But if there's still these other conversations going on, then once again, you're injecting these third parties into the situation, and all of a sudden something goes from being a total stranger, in a break-in, to like motives for other people to do things. And that's not victim blaming. That's just saying the more social connections you have, and especially when it comes to like personal relationships and things like that, well, then obviously there's going to be, it kind of amplifies and multiplies the number of people that can be involved. The other thing, I'll stop in a second, but the other thing I thought about is, and this is something that's kind of interesting to think about when there's another suspect that comes into the case later. Imagine if there's somebody who's not at all involved with her, but is sort of somehow becomes aware of this on the side, like either the word of mouth, they heard something, they saw something, and then they judge her unfairly, but they say, hey, this person's not acting in a moral way, or seems to be available to these other people. Well, why isn't she available to me? And if it's like some crazy person
Wow.
who sort of, what I mean, who already feels like entitled or unstable, or has like kind of a distorted view, as this one suspect that was brought up, um, not one of the people you just mentioned, a totally different person who seemed to have acted like that, allegedly in other parts of his life, sort of like way out of bounds and sort of entitled, and not seemingly understand the rules. Can you imagine someone like she might accidentally end up in this person's like crosshairs, because just because she was known, fairly or not, as somebody who was kind of down for like extramarital relationships, or you know what I mean. That's sort of my
Yeah.
my thought.
Are we referring to Bobby Wayne Henry by any chance?
I'm referring to somebody because I've heard he's very litigious. I'm referring to someone who could be very much like how he was described in different news events and
Oh,
other shows that I've seen. Yeah, somebody like that. I'm not
okay.
saying it was him, but I'm saying somebody showing some of the same personality characteristics of allegedly sort of not knowing the bounds of how to interact in male female relationships, and allegedly maybe doing sexual assaults of different several different people.
Hmm.
Um, now the one thing about someone like him is like 6 feet tall, but someone like him also seemed to have a very similar walk when he was on video
Oh,
later on. Yeah, yeah, and then and though he was that video I saw, I don't even know if he's really 6 feet tall anymore. He was all hunchbacked and like duck walking and stuff, and it was
yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know if he really is 6 feet tall anymore. Maybe he is a lot closer to like 5'7".
Yeah, but that's initially for me regarding the man, Bobby Henry, that we're only saying allegedly. We're just talking about him because, we're just a podcast. That's what we do on the podcast. But we have, like, I personally don't want to make any statements because I don't really have all of the information regarding this man. And I think I've stopped to some extent looking into him when I found out that he was actually apparently 6'1", but this is only what we can gauge because of his mugshot info. So those mugshot shots, they probably not always are super accurate. So maybe that could be the case. Now the fact that he had a similar walk, that's pretty interesting. I'm uh, not gonna say that that's not interesting, but just the fact that he's proposed to be 6'1", and this man or this person in the video could be anywhere from 5'2" to 5'7". So I don't know. I actually saw Gray Hughes's literally just before we started recording. I've seen Gray Hughes's estimation of the height, and actually at this point right here, this point right here in the video, when he was just looking at these, I guess, double doors or something like that. Gray Hughes estimated that I think this person could be around 5'10" of height, and since allegedly Bobby Henry is 6'1", if we could just sort of you know shorten that down a little bit, I think the height might be somewhat similar. I mean, personally, I will say this: from the video that we're seeing, I find it pretty hard to believe that this person is over 6 feet, if you know what I mean. Just in general, my reaction to how the doors, the sizing of the doors and the sizing of the other objects to the person, especially in this scene right here, like I find it really hard to believe that this is 6 foot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm not a super good like. It was only later in my life I was even able to start kind of estimating people's height because I used to not think about it
Yeah,
at all. It's kind of weird. Like sometimes when you're tall,
yeah,
because almost everyone else is shorter, you never really notice how high somebody is unless they're close to your height or bigger than your height. So I was really surprised actually to hear 5'2" to 5'7". I'm not disputing it, but for some reason maybe it's just the equipment and stuff and how I have envisioned somebody
yeah,
who wears that stuff. For some reason I thought the person was higher. I wanted to ask you just real quick, just going back for a second.
yeah.
I mean, what do you make of like what this person's doing with the hammer or crowbar or whatever? I mean, what do you think they're doing when they're like banging on the walls and stuff? I've never really seen a burglar do that. You know what I mean? I feel like they're usually
Yeah.
rifling through stuff. You know?
Yeah, basically, I think this is definitely signs of not knowing exactly what to do and just doing random stuff. Now, one thing, just as you said, just as you've asked me this question, I've realized that I have yet to forget to mention one of the potential theories, that this was just a potential burglar who stumbled upon Missy and then, just killed her because she was a witness of a potential burglary. Now let's remember that this is happening in a church, and this is happening on Monday. Now, usually there's a whole bunch of money collected in any church, uh, you know, like American churches as well, I assume, on Sunday Mass, when they hand you like these little bowls where you have to like put in currency in them and stuff like that. So I think that currency, those bills, may have still been somewhere in the church, and maybe some people are thinking that this guy or woman was just sort of just rummaging about and maybe trying to locate that stack of Sunday Mass cash until it's probably being transported to the bank maybe on Monday, in the afternoon or something like that. So they expect the money still to be here. Now, I will say I don't think this is a burglary, and because I think a burglar who would make an effort to put on a SWAT gear and just hide his body and stuff like that, uh, probably would go in and out, if you know what I mean. There would be no like rummaging about. I mean, this could all be done within 15 minutes. I think so. Like, this guy or woman doesn't at all seem to be in any rush at all. And to answer your question, what is this person doing with the hammer? Like, I have no idea. I don't even the interesting fact for me is this is not even a good setup to kill Missy. Let's say someone is out to kill Missy. Dude, do you think that this is the best way to do it in a
I
public
mean,
space?
plus Missy's in some kind of amazing shape now, right? Like she's. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things they mentioned was somebody at she goes to a gym on top of teaching these classes, right? So she's at a gym all the time, and somebody that knew her at the gym, so I think someone that worked at the gym said that she had been acting kind of reserved and all of a sudden hadn't been around for the past couple of weeks before this, and they thought that was an interesting change in her behavior, like maybe she was worried about something. And like when I heard that, I was like, oh my god, can you like the class that she teaches would probably level me already, all right? But then on
Yeah.
top of that, someone, I mean, these instructors, that's what kind of shape they're in, that they can do multiple boot camps a week and do their own real workout on top of that. So, like, this person doesn't seem like they're in good shape. Like, they seem like they're friggin' lazy about even trying to pretend to break in. Like,
Yeah.
they're kind of like, you know what I mean? They're kind of halfway pulling. I don't really want to. Like, you figure someone who would like fake a burglary might put their back into it a little bit and kind of put some scuff marks in the door and maybe pry open the door just to make it look like they tried something. This person looks like they're lazy and they don't look like they're in good shape. Like when they walk, they don't seem like they're healthy. They
Yeah.
don't, you know what I mean? They
Like,
don't have
what
good
is what are
mobility.
we looking at right now? Like, this person is not trying to open this door at all. Like, just
They look like I like the way you described it. Like they almost and that I mean, not to stereotype
yeah.
or to make broad conclusions about different people, but it does kind of actually make like I let me put it this way. They almost act with these tools like they've never really used tools before. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
Yeah.
whatever it is, you know what I mean? Because I mean, like it's not like I'm busy building houses and stuff. Though I did put in my own garbage disposal the other day, and I was super proud of myself. But I
Yeah.
mean, but like it's kind of I'm kind of laughing at myself, right? Because there's a lot of other people that are like doing their own roofs and stuff. But I know how to use a drill. I've used pry bars and sledgehammers and other stuff to break stuff. Like so, for me being a white collar worker who works on the internet, I still know how to use these tools. This person's acting like this is maybe one of the first times they ever put a hammer in there. Look at what the hell is this person? I don't even want to say he, because they're kind of like banging on the wall. Was that just to try to like make it look like there had been in a break, because it seems like it actually worked. It fooled some people where they're like, "Oh, there was a break-in." I don't even think this is a break-in. This is like vandalism, some kind of really minor vandalism on top of a murder.
But
But yeah,
does this happen just in general? Let's say this is unrelated to Missy in any sort of
yeah,
way, and Missy is just sort of just someone who was at the wrong time at the wrong place, right?
unlucky. Yeah,
Let's imagine that that's the situation. Do these type of things occur in America, where just random people just at the middle of the night ran into a
yeah,
church, do some weird stuff, then maybe leave the church? I mean, for me personally, I have never heard about this happening ever before, and I don't know. Have you ever heard about people just doing this?
yeah. I mean, I'll say, without diverging too much, I'll say that one of the things that always amazes me about the decade I was born in, so the 70s, when you go actually look at like teenagers and even people from that era, like there was a lot of antisocial behavior going on. So I think there's a lot of, in any kind of city, but
Yeah.
especially depending on what's going on, there's always people doing just destructive, violent, stupid things. There's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of, so that, I mean, like you said, it could be just totally something unrelated to Missy. She's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and this person who sort of doesn't really seem to know what they want to do, and maybe they're carrying a gun. Well, it sounds like they were carrying a gun. And then, like they're like, "Oh, I'm going to do a murder." And then they get out of there, and then they're just this person's just this stupid lucky crazy person who gets away with this. Yet like they did no good planning. It's just just for the fact that they seem to have
Yeah.
put on the right disguise. Now, the one thing I would say about that is, I mean, it is pretty awful. Once again, you look at kind of like these things going on in people's personal lives. Man, can you imagine if like you're doing something embarrassing in your life, but it's not criminal, right? There's no law necessarily against people having affairs, or like cheating on their partner necessarily, or all these things that like we kind of look down on. But it's not like you're stealing money from old ladies or something. So then all of a sudden something happens to somebody that you're connected to, and everyone's deep in your laundry. Case in point, um, Missy's father-in-law brought a woman's shirt to a cleaner's that had blood on it within a couple weeks of this. And the cleaners right away were like, "Oh my gosh." They called the police and they're like, "Are they trying to hide some kind of clue?" Okay, long story short, it turned out that when the father-in-law came to come support the family during the aftermath of this, one of the family dogs of the relatives he was staying with basically killed the chihuahua that they had. And
Jeez.
they carried the dog. Like they split the dogs up. Like the big dog like grabbed the chihuahua around his neck and basically gouged his throat open. So like Missy's mother-in-law had grabbed the dog to her chest, and they went to the vet. There's records for all this stuff. Like this actually happened. But then, even that, like even something that like, normally nobody would care, now because everyone's suspecting everyone like this became like a big deal where everybody was up on them and what are they hiding and this and that. So now it's like, can you imagine? I mean, I have to really commend that guy on LinkedIn who put himself out there and put himself in the crosshairs, right? By saying, "Hey, cops, like make sure you're looking at social media that like is basically encoded on an application level, because like that's something, like when you're on like a company intranet, they can't even necessarily see what you're saying on Facebook,
Yeah.
Facebook Messenger to other, because it's all encoded, right? For your privacy." So anyways, yeah, it's sort of like it's kind of interesting to think how something happening like this could just destroy your life. And imagine the other people that they may have looked at, like, yeah, maybe their wives or their girlfriends or whatever else was going on didn't know that something was going
Mm.
on. And now, now the cops are coming and they're like, "Oh, well, what?" The lady's asking her husband, "Well,
Yeah.
why are the police talking to you about this lady? What did you talk to her about?" And it's like, "Oh, Jesus, like who needs this, man? Like what?" Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that this is random, or do you think this is somebody that's lying in wait
Yeah.
and has one of those motives we talked about today?
Well, I will say there are a few points that before we close the show, I still want to address is the
Yeah.
fact that Missy has been leaving, like this information was available, first of all, that she was going to be in this church. So, it's this information was available. Missy had encounters with, I think, more people than the average person since she was a fitness teacher. So she obviously, met a lot of people. Now, to counter the line of thinking that maybe this is someone from the fitness class, or maybe this is like the beginner level fitness class person, because it doesn't look like us, you know what I mean? So I think another thing is, uh, why would a beginner at a fitness class would have such a vendetta to kill Missy? Maybe there was a class, and this person, maybe it is a small man. Let's say maybe it is a small man, and he's like thinking, oh my god, like he, like, Missy maybe said something to a small man, and the small man had like a high temper. He didn't really know how to use, as we can see from this video, tools. He just felt insecure that maybe Missy, being a woman, was performing a lot better at the fitness classes than him. Because, let's say, because I, personally, I find it really, I would say, I'd still say this is a man. Like, honestly, I will say this is still a man, because I find it hard to believe that a 5'2" woman with like no skills of how to use hammers or anything like that would just like sort of kill, Missy or something like that. Maybe if it was a situation where Missy entered the church, and Missy did think that this was a police officer. Maybe she didn't immediately assume that this was a robber, and that's when maybe the person got up close or behind Missy, and that's when they whacked her in the head with the hammer. I think that's probably the most likely explanation, right? Because Missy definitely seems like she's someone who could handle herself, especially against a person like that, I think. But then again, it wouldn't make any sense to kill Missy. If you had a vendetta against Missy, why would you pick this plan? Like, this is probably the craziest plan ever. Like, just get 30 minutes before and just wait around. And I mean, why would you? Is this person even pretending to burglarize stuff, or is this person crazy? You know what I mean? Is this just crazy behavior, or is this person actually pretending to burglarize? Because I think we both agree that the overall intent is not to steal anything from here. The overall motivation, I think, was either to do crazy stuff or to actually do end up killing Missy. So I think, dude, it's so hard for me to decide. I have no clue, actually. I'm really excited for the comments. Maybe someone in the comments, or people who contact us from, who listen to the podcast on the apps, maybe they will have some better ideas. Because, yeah, dude, what are your overall theories? Like, for me personally, I will say I just cannot decide, but I will say I don't think that this is I don't think this is a spouse of someone's from the, affairs. I don't think this is that. And I don't think that this was a robbery. So that's for sure. So I think that's all I can gauge. But why does it have to happen? I just can't say.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I'll just say it's one of two things. So either it is really somebody that was premeditated, and frankly, I mean, when I look at it, if I were just to stereotype the way the person moves, it does seem like an out of shape man.
Small man.
Yeah, out of shape small man with like maybe a belly, and that's why they're walking. Their center of gravity is weird, and they don't actually seem to be very strong with their upper body. So they've kind of let their body and then maybe even like their tool skills go to waste. Maybe they never really did much with tools. It's very strange. Yeah, it seems it's either that, and they really did have some kind of like you said, some kind of personal issue or obsession or something. So it's either like a really brilliant in terms of like just really gutsy or ballsy plan. But then the other part of me is like, this is a crazy plan. Like they're dressed like they're Batman or something. They're wearing this weird clothing that, had they been pulled over, it would nothing would have been deniable, right? It would have been super suspicious right away if the cops had pulled them over. It's not like the cops would have been like, "Oh, you're a police officer." They would have been like, "Yeah, why are you like I don't know you. You're not dressed like somebody from this jurisdiction." It The whole behavior, and like you said, the place that they picked to do it, the close proximity to when you know students are going to show up. I mean, technically, someone could have seen this person and maybe did drive right out of the parking lot. The timing and their general demeanor, and if that was them at the other store, like them hanging out in the area, like it seems like almost like somebody with a serious mental illness who really wasn't, they were so crazy that they weren't even afraid. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? They just had that kind of like crazy person. They just knew nothing was going to happen. Not that they're right, but like, you know what I mean? Like how I've seen disturbed people act. So that's my thought. I mean, I guess what kind of my parting thought as we close it out, just to, before I turn it back over to you, is one of the things that did actually get me really sad about it was, once again, on Stephanie Harlow's show, she played she put up the social media post that Missy's mother had put up, and I don't know why I didn't get sad until that part, but it's kind of this lashing out that the mom does, where it's sort of like a post to that person, if that person could actually read it, about, like how much pain and sadness this person has caused, and Missy's family's life, and what they're all going through, and how angry she is at this person, and how this person's gonna suffer in jail, in prison someday, or from some other, that they're already maybe suffering. And I don't know why, but for some reason that hit me in a way that maybe no other aspect of this case had done before. Maybe that just shows you the power of social media and how my emotions get stirred up by those kind of things. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that's actually a really wonderful summary, dude. I do agree that, as you sort of put it all together, I do think that this could have been, a shorter man who was just completely unhinged and, just was doing crazy stuff. I mean, that's how we could connect him to the SWFA outdoor store parking lot footage. Yep, that was definitely crazy. Guys, I'm really happy that you've joined us this week. I can't wait for your comments. Finally back. I'm feeling really good about this show. I'm excited for what we're going to be talking about next week. Haven't yet decided. That's going to be pretty fun to do. And yeah, guys, as always, I really appreciate that you all came back this week and listened to SMP once again. And I feel great, refreshed, and I'm looking forward for many more fascinating cases like this. So yeah, as always, catch us next time and stay safe and peace out.